Midnight, December 21st, 1944. South China Sea. The water is black glass. No moon, no stars visible through the thick tropical haze that hangs over the South China Sea like a shroud. Beneath the surface, 311 feet of American steel moves through the darkness at periscope depth. Silent, patient, lethal, U.S. Flasher, Gato class. 6 war patrols behind her. Commander George W. Grider stands motionless in the conning tower, his eyes pressed against the periscope lens, watching, waiting. The submarine's diesel engines are silent now, running on battery power alone. Every man aboard knows what that means. They are hunting. Somewhere ahead in the darkness, a Japanese convoy is moving south along the Indochina coast. Tankers carrying the lifeblood of the imperial war machine. Oil, fuel, the resources that keep Japanese carriers afloat. Fighters airborne, tanks rolling. Flasher has been tracking them for hours, plotting their course, calculating angles, waiting for the perfect moment. The sonar operator's voice breaks the silence. Bearing 270, multiple contacts, range 8,000 yards. Grider doesn't move. His fingers tighten on the periscope handles. This is what they came for. This is what Flasher does better than any submarine in the Pacific Fleet. The hunt is about to begin. The tension in Flasher's conning tower is almost physical. A pressure that has nothing to do with the ocean depth, and everything to do with what lies ahead. Commander George Grider stands perfectly still at the periscope, his body swaying slightly with the submarine's gentle roll, compensating automatically after weeks at sea. Around him, the control room crew moves with practiced efficiency, their voices low, their movements deliberate. No wasted motion, no unnecessary sound. They have done this before, many times before, but the fear never quite leaves. Fear is what keeps you sharp. Fear is what keeps you alive. The temperature inside the submarine hovers near 90 degrees despite the ventilation system running at full capacity. The air is thick with the smell of diesel fuel, cooking grease, human sweat, and the metallic tang of recycled oxygen. Condensation drips from the overhead pipes in irregular rhythm, pooling on the deck plates where it mixes with hydraulic fluid and seawater tracked in from the last surface run. The lighting is dim, red bulbs only, to preserve night vision for the men who will need to see in darkness if they surface. Every surface is painted gray or dull green, every gauge backlit with faint luminescence. This is Flasher's world, cramped, humid, claustrophobic, and utterly unforgiving of mistakes. Grider rotates the periscope slowly, scanning the horizon with methodical precision. He is 42 days into this patrol, Flasher's 5th war patrol, his first as her commanding officer. He took command only 6 weeks ago, replacing Commander Reuben Whitaker, the legendary skipper who led Flasher through her first 4 patrols and earned her the Presidential Unit Citation. Those are big shoes to fill, and Grider knows it. The crew knows it too. They watch him carefully, measuring him, testing him with their eyes even when their mouths stay silent. Grider doesn't blame them. In submarine warfare, trust in your commander isn't just important, it's everything. A bad decision at depth means death for everyone aboard, and there are no second chances at 300 feet below the surface. But Grider is no novice. Before taking Flasher, he served as executive officer on USS Wahoo under the legendary Commander Dudley "Mush" Morton, one of the most aggressive submarine skippers in the Pacific Fleet, until Wahoo disappeared on her 7th patrol, lost with all hands somewhere in the Sea of Japan. Grider survived only because he had rotated off before that final fatal mission. He carries that weight with him, the knowledge that he lived while 80 men he knew died. It makes him careful. It also makes him ruthless. He knows what's at stake. He knows what American submarines can accomplish when they're handled right. And he knows that the Japanese convoy moving through the darkness ahead represents a chance to strike a blow that will echo across the Pacific. The South China Sea in December 1944 is a killing ground. American submarines operate here with near impunity now, stalking the sea lanes between Japan and her conquered territories in Southeast Asia. The Japanese merchant marine is bleeding to death, slowly, inexorably, one torpedo at a time. Oil tankers, freighters, troop transports, all are targets, all are fair game. The Imperial Japanese Navy can still fight, can still mount devastating attacks when cornered, but without fuel and supplies. Their warships are just expensive steel monuments waiting to rust. American submarines are strangling the Japanese war effort, and Flasher has become one of the most efficient killers in the entire undersea fleet. Grider lowers the periscope and glances at the chart table where Lieutenant Ray Dubois, the executive officer, is plotting the convoy's estimated course. Dubois is methodical, brilliant with numbers, the kind of officer who can calculate torpedo firing solutions in his head faster than most men can work them out on paper. He looks up, meets Grider's eyes, nods once. The math is good. The geometry is perfect. Everything is aligned. All that remains is execution. Sonar, range and bearing, Grider says quietly. His voice is calm, almost conversational, but every man in the control room snaps to attention. This is the moment. This is why they're here. Bearing 270, range 7,000 yards, closing slowly. The sonar operator responds. His voice is steady, professional, but there's an edge to it. Excitement bleeding through discipline. Multiple contacts. Count 5 distinct propeller signatures. Heavy screws. Estimate large tonnage vessels. Tankers. Grider allows himself the ghost of a smile. Tankers are priority targets. Floating fuel depots that carry thousands of tons of crude oil and refined gasoline. Sink a tanker and you don't just remove one ship from Japan's merchant fleet. You eliminate the cargo it carries. Cargo that might have fueled 100 fighters or powered a battleship across the Pacific. It's strategic warfare reduced to its purest form. Find the enemy's logistical lifeline and cut it. All ahead 1/3, Grider orders. Make your depth 6-5 feet. Prepare tubes 1 through 6 for firing. The submarine responds immediately, rising slightly as the diving officer adjusts trim, bringing Flasher to optimal attack depth. Below, in the forward torpedo room, 6 Mark 14 torpedoes sit ready in their tubes, each one a 20-foot cylinder of steel, packed with explosives and driven by a sophisticated gyroscopic guidance system. The torpedomen have been preparing for this moment since they left port 42 days ago, checking and rechecking every seal, every battery connection, every firing circuit. Now their work will be tested against the most unforgiving judge of all, combat. Grider returns to the periscope, raising it just enough to clear the surface. The night is still utterly black, but now he can see them, dark shapes against darker water, moving in column formation. 5 tankers, maybe 6, with escorts somewhere in the mix. The lead ship is perhaps 4,000 yards away, close enough that Grider can make out the silhouette of its superstructure against the faint luminescence of the horizon. They're moving slowly, conserving fuel, following a predictable course. They have no idea Flasher is here, no idea that in the next few minutes, their world is about to explode. Stand by for surface attack, Grider says. His voice is still quiet, but there's steel in it now. Prepare to surface on my mark. The crew freezes. A surface attack. At night, it's aggressive, almost reckless. Exactly the kind of tactic that got submarines killed in the early days of the war, when American torpedoes were unreliable and Japanese escorts were vigilant. But this is December 1944, not December 1941. The Mark 14 torpedoes finally work after years of fixes and modifications. Flasher's crew is battle-hardened, experienced, lethal, and the Japanese escorts, stretched thin after 3 years of grinding attrition, are exhausted, undermanned, demoralized. Grider knows all this. He's counting on it. Surface, he orders. The ballast tanks blow with a roar of compressed air, and U.S. Flasher rises from the depths like a predator emerging from ambush. Within seconds, the conning tower breaks the surface, water streaming from its sides. The lookouts scramble topside, binoculars already scanning the horizon. The diesel engines roar to life, their thunder splitting the night silence. Flasher is committed now. No more hiding, no more stealth. This is a knife fight in a dark alley, and the only way out is through. Grider climbs to the bridge, feeling the warm night air hit his face. After hours in the recycled atmosphere below, the convoy is closer now, much closer, less than 3,000 yards in closing. He can see the tankers clearly, their massive hulls riding low in the water, heavy with cargo. Beautiful targets, perfect targets. All ahead full, he orders. Bring us to attack position. Flasher surges forward, her bow cutting through the black water, closing the distance with terrifying speed. The moment of contact is seconds away. Everything Flasher is trained for, everything her crew has endured over 42 days at sea, comes down to the next few minutes. They are the hunters. The Japanese are the prey, and the killing is about to begin. USS Flasher was born in the crucible of total war. Launched on June 20, 1943, at the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. She was hull number 249 in the United States Navy's rapidly expanding submarine fleet. A Gato-class boat, one of 77 sisters built to prosecute the undersea campaign against Japan. The Gato class represented the pinnacle of pre-war American submarine design. 311 feet 9 inches of welded steel, displacing 1,526 tons on the surface, and 2,410 tons submerged. Her maximum speed was 20 knots surfaced, running on 4 diesel engines that generated 5,400 horsepower, and 9 knots submerged on battery power. Her test depth was officially 300 feet, though experienced skippers like Grider knew she could go deeper, much deeper if circumstances demanded it. Her armament was formidable: 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, 6 forward and 4 aft, with a total magazine capacity of 24 Mark 14 torpedoes. Each torpedo weighed 3,280 pounds, carried a 643-pound Torpex warhead, and could travel up to 4,500 yards at 46 knots. When everything worked properly, and by late 1944, after years of catastrophic failures and urgent modifications, the Mark 14 finally worked. A single torpedo could break the back of a merchant ship or cripple a warship. Flasher also mounted a 3-inch 50-caliber deck gun, supplemented by 40mm Bofors and 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft cannons for surface engagements and defense against air attack. But her real power lay in stealth, in the ability to approach unseen, strike without warning, and disappear before the enemy could respond. Commander George William Grider understood this better than most. Born in Memphis, Tennessee, he graduated from the Naval Academy in 1927 and spent the pre-war years in the surface fleet before transitioning to submarines. His reputation was built serving as executive officer under Commander Dudley Morton aboard USS Wahoo, one of the most aggressive and successful submarines in the Pacific during 1943. Morton's philosophy was simple and brutal: get close, shoot straight, sink everything. Under Morton's command, Wahoo sank 27 ships and became a legend in the submarine service. But legends die too. Wahoo was lost on her 7th patrol in October 1943, presumably sunk by Japanese anti-submarine forces in the Sea of Japan. Grider had rotated off before that final mission. He lived. 80 men didn't. That knowledge shaped everything he did afterward. When Grider took command of Flasher on October 31, 1944, he inherited a boat with an already formidable reputation. Under her first commanding officer, Commander Reuben T. Whitaker, Flasher had completed 4 war patrols and sunk 15 ships, totaling nearly 60,000 tons. She had led 2 wolf packs, earned the Presidential Unit Citation for her 3rd and 4th patrols combined, and established herself as one of the most successful submarines in the Pacific Fleet. Whitaker was methodical, professional, a by-the-book commander who inspired absolute confidence through consistent competence. Grider was different, more relaxed in manner, more willing to bend regulations, but no less deadly. Where Whitaker planned every detail meticulously, Grider relied on instinct and experience. Where Whitaker maintained formal distance from his crew, Grider cultivated personal relationships. Different styles, same result: dead enemy ships. The strategic situation in December 1944 heavily favored American submarines. Japan's merchant marine was collapsing under relentless attrition. In 1941, Japan possessed approximately 6 million tons of merchant shipping, barely adequate to supply her far-flung empire, even in peacetime. By late 1944, American submarines had sunk over 4 million tons, and Japanese shipyards couldn't replace losses fast enough. Oil tankers were particularly critical. Japan's war machine ran on petroleum imported from the Dutch East Indies and Southeast Asia. Without tankers to transport crude oil to Japanese refineries, without refined fuel to supply the combined fleet, the Imperial Japanese Navy was slowly starving. Every tanker Flasher sank represented thousands of tons of fuel that would never reach Japan, dozens of warships that would sit idle in port, hundreds of aircraft that would never fly. This was economic warfare at its most fundamental. Cut the supply lines and watch the enemy wither. The South China Sea, in December 1944, was the last major convoy route, still partially operational. Japanese merchant ships hugged the Indochina coast, trying to move cargo under the questionable protection of shore-based air cover and aging escort vessels. But American submarines owned these waters now. They operated with near impunity, coordinating attacks through radio intelligence, sharing contact reports, running wolfpack tactics that overwhelmed Japanese defenses. The Imperial Japanese Navy still possessed powerful warships, battleships, carriers, cruisers, but without fuel, they were useless. Japan was losing the war not through dramatic fleet actions, but through slow strangulation, one torpedoed merchant ship at a time. Flasher's 5th War Patrol began on November 15, 1944, when she departed Fremantle, Australia, along with USS Hawkbill and USS Bakuna, as part of a coordinated attack group, designated Grider's Guerrillas. Their mission was simple: patrol the South China Sea, intercept Japanese shipping, and sink everything that moved. Grider commanded the group, directing tactics while simultaneously managing his own boat. It was a test, his first patrol as Flasher's commanding officer, his first time leading a wolf pack. The crew watched him carefully during those first weeks, measuring his decisions, evaluating his judgment. Submarine crews are merciless critics. They know their lives depend on the man giving orders from the conning tower, and they don't suffer fools. Grider passed the test. On December 4th, acting on a contact report from Hawkbill, Flasher intercepted a small Japanese convoy, consisting of a destroyer, an oiler, and several escorts. Grider attacked submerged in broad daylight, firing 4 torpedoes at the destroyer from 1,650 yards. 2 hit amidships, breaking the destroyer's back and sending her to the bottom in minutes. Grider immediately swung Flasher around and fired 2 torpedoes from the stern tubes at the oiler, hitting her squarely and setting her ablaze. The Japanese escorts counterattacked furiously, dropping depth charges that shook Flasher like a toy, but Grider went deep and evaded, creeping away on silent running, while explosions thundered overhead. Hours later, after the escorts gave up and departed, Flasher surfaced and finished the burning oiler, with a single torpedo at point-blank range. 2 ships sunk, 0 damage sustained. It was a textbook attack, flawlessly executed. But that was just the beginning. 17 days later, on December 21st, Flasher's radar picked up a much larger contact. 5 Japanese tankers in column formation, escorted by a single destroyer and 3 patrol craft, moving south along the Indochina coast toward Singapore. This was the target Grider had been hoping for, a major convoy carrying tens of thousands of tons of crude oil, inadequately protected, moving predictably through waters where Flasher could operate freely. The geometry was perfect. The opportunity was unmissable. Everything Flasher had trained for, everything the American submarine force had learned through 3 years of brutal trial and error, came together in this moment. Grider tracked the convoy through the afternoon and into the evening, plotting its course, calculating intercept angles, positioning Flasher for attack. The Japanese were moving slowly, perhaps 12 knots, conserving fuel in a war economy that no longer had fuel to spare. Their zigzag pattern was lazy, predictable, the kind of sloppy procedure that came from exhaustion and resignation. The destroyer escort was running minimal patrols, apparently more concerned with shepherding the convoy than actively hunting submarines. Perhaps they believed the darkness would protect them. Perhaps they thought American submarines wouldn't dare attack such a large formation, so close to shore. Perhaps they were simply too tired to care anymore. It didn't matter. Flasher was closing in, and there would be no escape. By midnight, on December 21st, 1944, Grider had maneuvered Flasher into perfect attack position. Ahead of the convoy, slightly to starboard, ready to strike from the darkness. The crew was at battle stations, every man at his post, every system ready. In the forward torpedo room, 6 Mark 14 torpedoes sat loaded and armed, their gyroscopes spinning, their warheads primed. In the conning tower, Lieutenant Dubois stood ready at the torpedo data computer, feeding in ranges, speeds, angles, transforming raw observations into precise firing solutions. And at the periscope, Commander George Grider watched the Japanese tankers approach through the darkness, his hands steady on the control handles, his mind calculating distances and probabilities. This was why Flasher existed. This was why 60 men lived in a steel tube beneath the ocean for weeks at a time, enduring heat and fear and isolation. This was the culmination of decades of submarine development, years of training, months of patrol. Everything came down to the next few minutes. Grider took one last look through the periscope, fixed the lead tanker in his crosshairs, and began to issue firing orders. The hunt was over. The killing had begun. The Pacific night holds no mercy for the unwary, and the Japanese convoy steaming south through the South China Sea on December 22, 1944, is spectacularly unwary. Commander George Grider watches through Flasher's periscope as the lead tanker crosses his firing point, its massive hull silhouetted against the faint glow of bioluminescent plankton disturbed by its passage. The ship is perhaps 10,000 tons fully loaded, a Kyokuyo Maru-class vessel, if Grider's recognition training is correct, riding low in the water with a full cargo of crude oil. Behind it, strung out in careless column formation, 4 more tankers follow at regular intervals. The destroyer escort is running far to starboard, apparently concerned about a minefield that doesn't exist. Grider rotates the periscope slowly, taking in the entire tactical picture with practiced efficiency. Range to the lead ship, 2,200 yards, speed 12 knots. Angle on the bow approximately 115 degrees, a perfect starboard track angle for a bow shot. The second tanker in column is equally well positioned, overlapping the first in Grider's field of view. 2 targets, 6 torpedoes loaded forward. The mathematics is simple and brutal. 3 fish per target, high probability of multiple hits, maximum damage in minimum time. Bearing mark, Grider says quietly. His voice is conversational, almost casual, but every man in the conning tower knows what that tone means. They've heard it before in training, in practice approaches, in previous attacks. Now it's real. 015. Lieutenant Dubois responds instantly, reading the periscope bearing from the repeater. His fingers move across the torpedo data computer, feeding in the information, refining the firing solution. The TDC is an analog mechanical computer. Gears, cams, differential mechanisms that transform observed data into torpedo gyro angles. When it works properly, it's nearly infallible. When it doesn't, torpedoes go wildly off course, and submarines die. Range, mark. 2200 yards, the executive officer confirms. Solution set, ready to fire. Grider makes one final observation, checking the tanker's bow wave, confirming his speed estimate. 12 knots, maybe 13. Close enough. The torpedoes will adjust. Fire 1. The submarine shudders slightly as compressed air drives the first torpedo from its tube. Somewhere forward, the torpedo room crew is already reloading, working with controlled urgency to prepare the next shot. Fire 2. Fire 3. 3 torpedoes away, streaking through the darkness at 46 knots toward the lead tanker. Grider immediately shifts aim to the second ship in column. Bearing mark, 020. Dubois calls out. The TDC whirs, recalculating. Solution updated, ready to fire. Fire 4, Fire 5, Fire 6. 3 more torpedoes launch in rapid succession. Flasher's bow torpedo room is now empty. 6 deadly projectiles running hot and true through the black water toward their targets. Total elapsed time from first observation to final shot, 90 seconds. Grider lowers the periscope. Now comes the hardest part, the waiting. 45 seconds pass. Grider counts silently, his internal clock synchronized with the torpedo run time. At 46 seconds, the night explodes. The first torpedo hits the lead tanker just forward of the bridge, detonating against the hull with a muffled whump that carries clearly through Flasher's pressure hull. 2 seconds later, the second torpedo hits farther aft, near the engine room. The third torpedo misses, running underneath, depth setting slightly off, but 2 hits are more than sufficient. The tanker shudders, lists immediately to starboard as seawater floods through torn hull plates and begins to burn. Crude oil ignites on contact with hot metal and electrical sparks, sending flames roaring skyward. The ship is dying, and it knows it. The second tanker never had a chance. All 3 torpedoes aimed at her strike within 5 seconds of each other. 1 forward, 1 amidships, 1 aft. The sequential impacts literally break the ship's back, snapping the keel like kindling. The explosions are enormous, far larger than the hits on the first ship, suggesting that Flasher's torpedoes found not just hull plating but internal fuel tanks. A fireball erupts from the tanker's midsection, climbing hundreds of feet into the night sky, turning darkness into hellish orange daylight. The ship begins to fold in on itself, bow and stern rising as the broken center section floods and sinks. 5 hits out of 6 torpedoes, Dubois reports, his voice carefully neutral but his eyes shining with suppressed excitement. Both targets critically damaged. First target burning and listing, second target breaking up. Grider allows himself a tight smile. Come left to course 270, all ahead full. Prepare stern tubes for firing. Flasher responds instantly, swinging hard to port, bringing her 4 aft torpedo tubes to bear on the convoy's trailing ships. The Japanese are reacting now, slowly, chaotically, but reacting. The destroyer escort is turning toward the explosions, accelerating to flank speed, searchlights stabbing through the darkness. The surviving tankers are scattering, breaking formation, each captain making his own decision about whether to run, stop, or or continue on course. It's panic masquerading as tactics, and it's exactly what Grider was counting on. The third tanker in column is still moving south, apparently paralyzed by indecision. Its captain probably can't see Flasher in the darkness, can't determine where the attack came from, can't decide whether surfacing submarines or submerged torpedoes represent the greater threat. That moment of hesitation is fatal. Bearing, mark, Grider snaps, tracking the third tanker through the periscope. Range 1,900 yards. Angle on the bow, roughly 130 degrees. Another perfect setup. Fire 7, Fire 8, Fire 9, Fire 10, all 4 stern tubes discharge in rapid sequence. Flasher's entire torpedo loadout, forward and aft, is now in the water or exploding against enemy hulls. The boat carries 14 torpedoes in reserve stowage, but reloading under combat conditions takes time. Time Grider doesn't have with a destroyer closing fast. 2 of the 4 stern-fired torpedoes strike the third tanker amidships. The ship erupts in flames, adding to the inferno already consuming the first 2 victims. Now 3 tankers are burning, their cargoes of crude oil feeding fires that will burn for hours, visible for miles. The South China Sea has become a lake of fire, and at the center of that hell U.S. Flasher turns away into the darkness, diving to evade the oncoming destroyer. Take her down, make your depth 200 feet. Rig for depth charge, all ahead full, steer 090. Flasher's bow tilts sharply downward as the diving officer floods ballast tanks and drives the boat deep. Within 60 seconds, the submarine is sliding beneath the thermal layer, a boundary between warm surface water and cooler deep water that deflects sonar and confuses enemy hydrophones. Grider feels the temperature drop as they pass through the layer, condensation suddenly forming on every metal surface. The crew secures for depth charge attack, dogging hatches, shutting ventilation, preparing for the hammer blows they know are coming. They don't have to wait long. The Japanese destroyer reaches the attack site and begins dropping depth charges with methodical fury. The explosions are tremendous, each charge detonating with a thunderclap roar that makes Flasher's hull ring like a struck bell. Light bulbs shatter. Cork insulation rains down from the overhead. Men brace themselves against bulkheads, riding out the concussions, waiting for the one catastrophic hit that will rupture the pressure hull and send seawater flooding in at lethal pressure. But that hit never comes. The destroyer is dropping charges where Flasher was, not where she is now. Grider has already slipped away, creeping east on battery power, putting distance between his boat and the furious enemy, searching for him above. After 30 minutes of depth charging, the explosions grow more distant, then cease altogether. The destroyer has given up or run out of ordnance. Grider brings Flasher back to periscope depth cautiously, raising the scope just enough to sweep the horizon. The 3 tankers are still burning, pyres marking Flasher's success. The 4th and 5th tankers have escaped into the darkness. The destroyer is circling the burning wrecks, apparently attempting rescue operations. Grider watches for several minutes, confirming the tactical picture, then makes his decision. Surface the boat. Reload all tubes. We're going after the ones that got away. U.S. Flasher rises from the depths once more. Her diesels roar to life, and the hunt continues. 3 tankers sunk in one night is a good start. But Commander George Grider isn't finished yet, not even close. Dawn, on December 22, 1944, reveals a South China Sea transformed into a graveyard. 3 Japanese tankers have gone to the bottom during the night, taking with them approximately 30,000 tons of crude oil that will never reach Japanese refineries. The surviving convoy escorts are still searching the attack zone, dropping occasional depth charges on phantom contacts, their crews exhausted and demoralized. And somewhere beyond the horizon, running south at maximum speed, the 2 tankers that escaped Flasher's initial assault are racing toward the imagined safety of Singapore. They will never reach it. Commander George Grider stands on Flasher's bridge as the submarine runs surface through the tropical dawn, her 4 diesel engines driving her forward at 19 knots. The air is thick with humidity and the smell of salt spray. Behind him, the sun is rising over Indochina, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson that seem obscenely beautiful, given the destruction of the previous night. Grider ignores the view. His attention is fixed on the plotting table below in the conning tower, where Lieutenant Dubois is tracking the escaped tankers based on their last known course and speed. Estimate. They're 40 miles ahead, Dubois reports through the bridge voice tube. If they maintain current speed and don't alter course, we can intercept by early afternoon, provided they don't have air cover, Grider mutters. That's the gamble now. Japanese air patrols operate from bases along the Indochina coast, and 3 burning tankers will have generated frantic radio traffic. Enemy aircraft could appear at any time, forcing Flasher to dive and abandon the pursuit. But it's a risk Grider is willing to take. 2 more tankers mean potentially 20,000 more tons of enemy shipping destroyed, fuel that won't power Japanese fighters or warships. A strategic blow that justifies tactical risk. The morning passes in tense silence. Flasher charges south, her lookouts scanning the sky constantly for enemy aircraft. Below decks, the torpedo crews work frantically to reload the forward tubes, manhandling the heavy Mark 14 fish from their storage racks into the firing tubes, checking gyroscopes, testing circuits, preparing for the next attack. It's brutal physical labor in heat that approaches 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but no one complains. The crew knows what's at stake. They've seen what Flasher can accomplish when everything goes right. They want more. At 13:30 hours, Flasher's radar picks up surface contacts, bearing 180 degrees, range 22,000 yards. Grider orders battle stations and pushes the diesels to maximum power. Flasher surges forward, black smoke pouring from her exhausts, closing the range rapidly. By 1400 hours, the tankers are visible from the bridge. 2 large vessels running in company, no escorts visible, apparently believing that daylight and proximity to shore will protect them. They're wrong. Grider considers his options. A submerged approach would be safer, more conventional, but it would take time the tankers might use to reach shallow coastal waters where Flasher can't follow. A surface approach in broad daylight is audacious, almost reckless, but Flasher has speed advantage and the element of surprise. The Japanese won't expect an American submarine to attack on the surface in daylight. That psychological edge might be worth more than tactical caution. We're going in on the surface, Grider announces. Gun action. We'll save the torpedoes for targets that require them. The crew's response is immediate and enthusiastic. Flasher's deck gun crew races topside, training the 3-inch 50 caliber weapon forward, loading high explosive shells, preparing to engage. The 40 Bofors crews man their stations, ready to suppress any defensive fire from the tankers. This is submarine warfare at its most aggressive, close-range surface action, gambling that superior American gunnery and crew training will overwhelm Japanese defenses before enemy reinforcements arrive. At 6,000 yards, Flasher opens fire. The 3-inch gun barks, recoils, and fires again, a steady rhythm of violence. The first shells fall short, throwing up waterspouts near the nearer tanker. The gun crew adjusts elevation and fires again. This time the shells strike home, impacting the tanker's superstructure, starting fires, destroying bridge equipment. The tanker attempts to return fire with deck-mounted machine guns, but the range is too great, and Flasher's 40 Bofors quickly silence the defensive weapons. For 20 minutes, Flasher pounds the first tanker with high explosive shells, methodically destroying the ship's ability to navigate or communicate. The tanker slows, lists, begins to burn. Grider watches through binoculars, coldly evaluating damage, deciding whether the ship is sufficiently crippled or requires a torpedo to finish it. He decides to conserve torpedoes. The tanker is done, dead in the water, burning, taking water through shell holes below the waterline. It will sink on its own within hours. The second tanker is attempting to flee, altering course toward the coast, desperately trying to reach shallow water. Grider orders Flasher to pursue, and the submarine responds, overtaking the fleeing vessel with contemptuous ease. By 15:30 hours, Flasher is within 4,000 yards and opening fire again. This tanker is better defended or more determined. Its crew mans machine guns and keeps firing even as Flasher's shells tear through the superstructure. But the outcome is never in doubt. American firepower and training overwhelm Japanese desperation. Shell by shell, Flasher reduces the tanker to a burning wreck. And then the aircraft appear. Aircraft bearing 045, range 10 miles, closing fast. The lookout's voice cracks with urgency. Grider swings his binoculars toward the contact and immediately identifies 3 Japanese bombers, probably Navy Type 1 attack bombers based on their silhouette, approaching at low altitude. Clear the bridge. Dive. Dive. Grider's orders crack like whip shots. The deck gun crews abandon their weapon and drop through the main deck hatch. Grider is last down, pulling the hatch shut behind him, as Flasher's ballast tanks flood and the submarine's bow tilts sharply downward. Within 45 seconds, Flasher is submerged, sliding beneath the surface just as the first Japanese bombs hit the water, where she'd been moments before. The explosions are enormous, even at depth, shaking the submarine violently. Grider brings Flasher to 200 feet and goes silent, waiting for the aircraft to give up and depart. It takes 15 minutes of circling and occasional bombing runs before the Japanese pilots accept that the submarine has escaped and turn back toward their base. By then, Flasher is 3 miles away, creeping south on battery power. When Grider finally brings the boat back to periscope depth, both tankers are still burning, but afloat, their stubborn refusal to sink a testament to their robust construction. Grider decides to finish them properly. At twilight, he surfaces and fires 1 torpedo into each ship from long-range insurance shots to ensure neither vessel survives the night. Both torpedoes hit, both tankers explode and sink rapidly, their oil cargoes igniting in spectacular fireballs visible for 20 miles. 5 tankers in 24 hours. Over 40,000 tons of enemy shipping destroyed. 0 damage to Flasher. It is, by any measure, one of the most successful submarine patrols in the Pacific War. And Commander George Grider has only been in command for 6 weeks. That night, as Flasher withdraws from the patrol area to avoid counterattack, Grider composes a radio message to Pearl Harbor. 5 tankers sunk, torpedoes expended. Returning to base, the response from ComSubPac is brief, but carries enormous weight. Well done, Flasher. Presidential Unit Citation recommended. Grider reads the message, nods once, and files it away. There will be time for commendations and ceremonies later. Right now, Flasher needs to get home safely, and 4,000 miles of hostile ocean lie between the South China Sea and Australia. The hunt may be over, but the patrol isn't finished yet. USS Flasher arrived back at Fremantle, Australia, on January 4, 1945, completing her 5th war patrol after 49 days at sea. She returned with empty torpedo racks, nearly depleted fuel tanks, and a battle flag displaying 6 new ship silhouettes, representing the 6 vessels sunk during the patrol. The final accounting was staggering. 42,868 tons of enemy shipping destroyed, making Flasher's 5th patrol one of the single most successful submarine missions in the entire Pacific War. Commander George Grider had proven himself not just equal to his legendary predecessor, but potentially even more lethal. The crew's doubts evaporated. Grider was their skipper now, fully and completely, earned through combat success and aggressive leadership. The Presidential Unit Citation came through as promised. Flasher's second such award, a nearly unprecedented honor for a submarine that had been in commission barely 18 months. The citation read in part, "For extraordinary heroism in action against enemy Japanese shipping and combatant units during her 5th war patrol, operating in heavily patrolled enemy-controlled waters, the USS Flasher destroyed 6 hostile ships totaling more than 40,000 tons. Her brilliant record of achievement attests the fighting spirit and teamwork of her officers and men." The words were bureaucratic and formal, but they represented something profound, official recognition that Flasher and her crew had achieved something exceptional, something that would be remembered long after the war ended. The strategic impact of Flasher's December 1944 patrol extended far beyond the 6 ships sent to the bottom. Those 5 tankers represented approximately 35,000 tons of crude oil that would never reach Japanese refineries, fuel that might have powered 50 destroyers for a month, or kept 500 fighters airborne for crucial hours during the Luzon campaign, then underway in the Philippines. Japan's oil situation in late 1944 was already catastrophic. American submarines had reduced the flow of petroleum from Southeast Asia to a trickle. The combined fleet was rationing fuel so severely that major warships sat idle in port, unable to sortie for lack of bunker fuel. Pilot training programs were curtailed because aviation gasoline couldn't be spared for practice flights. The Imperial Japanese Navy was being strangled, not through dramatic fleet engagements, but through simple arithmetic. Submarines were sinking tankers faster than Japan could replace them. American intelligence analysts studying ultra-intercepts decoded Japanese naval communications, noted with grim satisfaction that Flasher's attack generated frantic enemy radio traffic. Japanese convoy commanders began demanding stronger escorts, which the Imperial Navy couldn't provide. Tanker crews increasingly refused to sail without overwhelming protection, causing critical delays in supply shipments. The psychological impact of submarine warfare was, in some ways, even more devastating than the physical losses. Every merchant sailor who died in a torpedo attack was one fewer experienced seaman available for future convoys. Every captain who witnessed his ship explode and sink was traumatized, made cautious, slowed down by fear. And fear, in total war, is a force multiplier for the enemy. USS Flasher departed on her 6th and final war patrol in March 1945, again under Commander Grider's leadership. This patrol added 3 more ships to her tally, bringing her total wartime sinkings to 21 vessels, representing 100,231 tons, the highest tonnage total of any American submarine in World War II. Other submarines sank more ships by count. USS Tautog held the record with 26 ships, US Tang with 24, but no boat exceeded Flasher's tonnage destroyed. Those 100,231 tons represented destroyers, cruisers, merchantmen, and above all tankers, high-value targets, whose loss struck directly at Japan's ability to continue the war. The war ended in August 1945, with Japan's surrender following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the path to that surrender had been paved, in significant measure, by submarines like Flasher. American undersea forces accounted for 55% of all Japanese shipping losses during the war. 1,314 merchant vessels sunk, totaling approximately 5.3 million tons, plus 214 naval warships destroyed. This was accomplished by a force that never exceeded 250 submarines on active patrol, representing less than 2% of total U.S. Navy personnel. It was, by any measure, one of the most devastatingly effective military campaigns in history, economical in resources expended, catastrophic in damage inflicted, strategically decisive in outcome. Flasher herself survived the war intact, one of only 128 American submarines to return home when 52 boats were lost with all hands. She was decommissioned in 1946, briefly reactivated during the Korean War for training duties, and finally struck from the Naval Register in 1963. Her conning tower was preserved, and now stands as a memorial at the Submarine Force Museum in Groton, Connecticut, a physical reminder of her service and sacrifice. Visitors can touch the steel that once cut through Pacific waters, can read the battle flags displaying 21 ship silhouettes, can imagine the 60 men who lived inside that steel tube for months at a time, hunting the enemy in an environment that offered no margin for error. Commander George Grider survived the war and wrote a memoir, Warfish, describing his experiences aboard Wahoo and Flasher. The book became required reading for submarine officers, valued for its honest portrayal of the fear, exhaustion, and moral complexity of undersea warfare. Grider later served in the post-war Navy, eventually retiring as a rear admiral. He died in 1991, remembered as one of the great submarine commanders of World War II, a man who took a boat already famous and made it legendary. The legacy of USS Flasher extends beyond statistics and battle honors. She represented the maturation of American submarine warfare, the culmination of 3 years of desperate learning, technical improvement, and tactical innovation. Early in the war, American submarines were handicapped by defective torpedoes, inadequate tactics, and excessive caution. By 1944, those problems had been solved. The Mark 14 torpedo finally worked reliably. Commanders like Grider understood how to exploit Japanese weaknesses, and the institutional culture of the submarine service rewarded aggression and results rather than caution and seniority. Flasher's success was individual, the product of one crew, 2 commanders, 6 patrols, but it was also systemic, reflecting the entire submarine force's evolution, from well-meaning amateurs to professional killers. Today, nearly 80 years after Flasher's last patrol, her record remains unbroken. No American submarine in any subsequent conflict has matched her 100,231 tons of enemy shipping destroyed. Modern submarines are more capable, more deadly, more technologically sophisticated, but they've never faced an enemy with a merchant marine to sink, or the strategic necessity to prosecute unrestricted submarine warfare. Flasher's achievement belongs to a specific moment in history, when submarines were the decisive weapon in a total war, when individual boats could alter strategic outcomes, when 60 men in a steel tube could sink an island's worth of ships. The South China Sea, where Flasher hunted, is peaceful now, crisscrossed by commercial shipping lanes carrying cargo between Asia and the world. Japanese tankers still ply those waters, but now they carry electronics and automobiles, not crude oil for a war machine. The wrecks of the ships Flasher sank lie somewhere on the seafloor, slowly corroding in the salt water, marking graves for sailors who died doing their duty, just as Flasher's crew did theirs. War is not glorious, and victory is not clean, but it is sometimes necessary, and it is always bought with the courage of men willing to place themselves in harm's way. U.S. Flasher was one of America's silent hunters in the Pacific War. She was the unstoppable predator, the nightmare that Japanese convoy commanders feared, the submarine that sank more tonnage than any other. And in the end, she did exactly what she was built to do. She strangled Japan's war economy one torpedo at a time, and helped bring the Pacific War to its conclusion. That is her legacy. That is why we remember her. And that is why, 80 years later, her story still matters.